Very good. Now, he writes an entire volume or 2 volumes on Mughal revenue administration without even referring once to the work of Sir Jadunath Sarkar.
So that's how the erasure started.
Erasure started. And how would the students studying under, say Irfan Habib or Romila Thapar, you set up an incentive system for students, whereby if you quote and cite only these fellows, then you get awarded your degree or PhD or MA or whatever. Let me give you a real life example. One PhD scholar submitted a thesis about some area of the Mughal period, and that thesis, the guide, it was submitted to a Marxist historian at JNU. So he went through the thesis and he found that in one footnote, the student had cited Jadunath Sarkar only once. Once. It was rejected.
That was good enough to...
So you see the incentive, incentive, how the system works.
This is so clever.
Yes. And if that is at that higher level, at the lower levels in the primary school textbooks, you distort history so much, and from day one you're fed this kind of distorted history. So what happens? The student at class level, at primary and then middle school, high school, college, PU level, grows up reading this distorted history and thinks that this is real Indian history. So thereby you create one entire generation of students who then graduate and become teachers, and once you retire, they take your place. And then this vicious cycle goes on. So that is technique number 3. Technique number 4. Once all these people who graduate, students who graduate in the humanities, not necessarily history, but speaking overall, humanities, these people nurture them. They give them a career path. मतलब तुम life के लिए set हो. They have created that kind of a lifelong career track.
So you're part of the tribe?
You're part of the tribe.
You accepted the agenda?
And in many cases, the agenda is already set by them and indoctrinated to you in school textbooks.
Correct.
So you don't know an alternative at all. No alternative is provided.
And that line you said keeps haunting me. They got our children. So any indoctrination has happened.
Children. So that. And they would pack them off they would, give them lecturerships, and others would go on to do UPSC. Classic example. The entire humanities, especially history, books, material that you have to read for an UPSC aspirant is all written by these fellows.
And the scary part is these go on to become very responsible people.
They go on to become civil servants, bureaucrats, IAS officers. They decide the policies, how policy should be implemented. So this is nothing short of a total subversion of the Indian state itself, using education as a vehicle. They have done this on a spectacular scale, sir.
Yes, absolutely.
Alright, so that is technique number 4. And parallel, look at the areas they have captured. Intellectuals. They encourage them to, become intellectuals, whatever the term means. I really don't like that word, intellectual. I associate the term intellectual with sloth.
Okay. And that is why?
There's a very erudite, very learned British author. His name is Paul Johnson.
Paul Johnson.
He's written a fantastic book called Intellectuals. From Marx to from Marx to somebody.
Not Sam Petroda. I'm just kidding.
No. Please, yeah.
I'm sorry.
From Marx to somebody till his time. So he profiles about 14 so-called intellectuals and literateurs, beginning with Rousseau all the way up to Ernest Hemingway and other people. So cultural vandals like Jean-Paul Sartre, they are mentioned. And who's that other fellow? Norman Mailer. All these people are profiled. It's a fantastic book. So he says, he has very acerbic things to say about this so-called intellectuals, that the work that was being performed by the clergy, I mean, it's set in the context of the Western culture, but it has universal validity in the sense that the work that used to be performed by the Christian clergy. Remember, the clergy is a very learned class of people. I mean, they might use it to convert non-Christians, but that's a separate matter. You cannot question their erudition.
Okay.
They go through a very, very rigorous kind
Process
of training.
getting
For
there.
12 years, 14 years, 20 years. It's not an easy profession in that sense.
Okay.
So the work that used to be done by these people to educate the society, to refine the society, to maintain a sense of stability and order and balance in the society was usurped by these intellectuals without the aid of tradition. This is why tradition is important, but I'm digressing horribly. Anyway, so the Marxists, and remember that Karl Marx had a great respect for Rousseau. Not too many people know this.
Okay.
A lot of the ideas that Marx has written and spoken about can be traced back to Rousseau.
So borrowed from Rousseau?
Borrowed, inspired, whatever.
Okay. Okay.
So he had a great respect for that man. So that fellow, and Marxists, when for the longest time, when you use the word intellectual, it was associated with either a socialist or a Marxist. A lot of people have forgotten this point. To be an intellectual is to be a Marxist and vice versa.
Synonyms.
So these fellows in our country, as elsewhere, because these fellows are photocopies or slaves of Russia or China or France or wherever, and they encourage their students to become intellectuals. They encourage them to become academics. They encourage them to become journalists. It is not a coincidence that even today, majority of people in journalism, be it editors, reporters, whoever, columnists, they are all Marxists. Even today. This process started way back in the 1950s. And then when the Marxists took over, they took it to a different level. So you see what happens once you capture education. You capture the whole nation. Most importantly, what this kind of capture does is that it has a great potential to influence what is known as popular culture, popular fashions. See what they say, what they have professed and what they have written about and spoken about, speeches, articles, all these things, they become the topics for day-to-day gossip and conversation.
So they're driving conversations.
They're
right down to the last mile.
conversations in coffee shops, in tea shops, chai ka dukan, this kind of thing. And people, why does it become part of the? Why did Marxism become part of the popular lingo? Because they had control over all these establishments. Plus, even today, newspaper reading is a subconscious habit.
First
You
thing in the
don't
morning.
even think
Yes,
about it.
yes.
And there is a tendency even today to believe in the printed word.
Yes, absolutely. A big
Alright.
fallacy here.
So the average person, proverbial common man, he or she doesn't think twice. They don't indulge in, give critical scrutiny to what is written in newspapers and magazines. And so Parag is reading India Today, Sandeep is reading Outlook, somebody else is reading some other paper. The same opinion is reflected in all these three magazines. The shades are different.
Yeah, we've all been recipients of that.
That's all.
So every medium which touches the proverbial common man was in their control.
Their control. So this is how they rig the whole system. So when you capture popular imagination, who will scrutinize what history you have written, sir? These are all some of the techniques, and I'll close off this technique section with one last point. How many of us including me, know how the system to procure books for government libraries function? Nobody knows.
No.
Marxists knew. They knew this. You might think that, government libraries, uska kya hai? I mean, who visits? They're all free libraries. No? Anybody can walk in and, read. Essentially, you can't borrow it. But why do you need to capture libraries? Because libraries are funded, as we all know, by taxpayer money. And a big share of taxpayer money goes into the history establishment to, the library department. It's all distributed. So by capturing libraries over a period of time, Marxists ensured that only books which are supportive or which endorse their ideology, only such books should be available to the common person.
So every touch point,
yes,
they had visualized the whole map,
yeah,
and systematically.
This is why I said their understanding, their cultivation of the bureaucracy, of the functioning of bureaucracy is unparalleled. So you fill all the public libraries only with Marxist literature. So an ordinary person who comes to visits the library with an open mind, a blank, clean slate, he or she finds only this trash with no alternate.
And therefore it is taken as gospel.
Correct. So, example, instead of having the original Vedavyasa's Mahabharata, you have a Marxist interpretation of Mahabharata. This is how they've rigged the whole system. And I forgot to mention one point when I was talking about newspapers, journalism. They went to such extents, Parag, they would have a Marxist monitoring in charge of a section called Letters to the Editor.
Okay, so to see what the public opinion is or reactions are.
Correct. So this we saw most notably. You take the newspaper cuttings from the last 50 years at least. 50 if not 60 years at least. Look at the letters to the editor. Uniform opinion. Not one dissenting opinion about, say, communalism, what they define as communalism, and about not one letter critical of Nehru's secularism will be published. Very rare.
Okay. So even
out of 1,000 letters endorsing communism and socialism and glorifying Nawab Nehru and singing praises to Stalin and the Soviet model and the great communist paradise that Jyoti Basu ushered in West Bengal, out of 1,000 letters endorsing these things, only 5 letters mildly critical of them would be published. There was a policeman in the guise of masquerading as a journalist sitting and monitoring the letters to the editor.
My God. So even if there was a little chance of public opinion creeping into these newspapers, showing dissent or a different opinion, even that was filtered out.
Yes.
So a reader who may want to consider an alternate opinion will find that everybody thinks the same way too.
Exactly.
So well thought out.
Yeah.
So well thought out.
Look at the scale, extent, and the at the levels of which they have manipulated the whole system.